I tried real hard this morning to remember everything. I tried to remember all the materials I need. I brought an extension cord. Boy, I remember the key to the camper, thanks to my wife reminding me of that. This time though, I kind of messed up. After all that work, I ran out and forgot my tool bag. So, Well, let me put some thought into that. And while I'm trying to sort that out, I'm going to cut back home and explain a little bit about the latches that I purchased and some of the challenges there.
And here's what I took out. So there are two items to this. One is these little just thumb operated latches, and the other is the key lock latch. So now this isn't the original key lock latch that came on the truck camper. It was a standard unit that uses the same key that all the other RVs do. I'm sure those of you who've looked around know what that is. Don't think I'm giving anything away to say pretty much one key fits every RV locker out there. And so the previous owner, as we had bought our camper used, had swapped out to these round key units. Couple of problems for these. One is they have this straight latch, sort of the straight locking mechanism here, and it's shorter than the current latch out there. So you can see these don't quite line up, and that makes this a much tighter fit on the door lock. The levers were not as long, so that makes the fact that what it's hooking to a little bit less secure. And the other issue with these, and I'll explain this a little bit later, is you can only remove the key on these with this latch in the locked position. When you're ordering these, basically there's a few different dimensions that are important. One is the full distance here along this chamber where the nut screws on. That of course needs to be thick enough for your locker doors. And the other one then is the distance from the latch to the face of the mating surface of the lock here too, so that when this latch is closed, it'll actually close. It doesn't interfere with the body, but at the same time, it's not so loose that the door rattles. And they're available in two different types. You can get with an offset here, and then you can get it also in a straight type of a latch, and this one is bent. There's a reason for that, but again, go over that later. And a lot of the kits will come with interchangeable, two different, both an offset and a straight. So with that in mind, I attempted to find some products on Amazon that would work to replace these and be a good quality. So the thumb latches were pretty straightforward, so I was able to purchase these. These are they're a little different style, but they're nice and new and shiny, no corrosion. They are approximately the same depth, and they came with an offset latch here as well. So between the offset latch and this, I think these are going to be a good direct match. The key locks, I was not so fortunate. Now, when I looked at the specs online, this is what came out and what I found part number wise, and a lot of these have drawings on Amazon that you can look at, and it looked like this would work. But now that I've gotten it here, something doesn't seem to match up. I'll have to look into that, because this barrel is just as short as the ones I took out. The only good thing about that, though, is they do come with an offset, so that could make up for some of that. The bad part about that, however, is that these little latches, one of the things I was looking for specifically was that they had a nice long latch here. And as you can see, what actually showed up was quite a bit, my hands on here, quite a bit smaller. Maybe I can reuse some of what's out there, and some of these thumb latches that I'm going to replace, I can take these off and use these on the locks, but we'll have to see how that works with the shorter barrels.
We're back here at the storage area, and at the camper crust, I did manage to come up with this, my trusty Gerber multi-tool that I keep in the glove compartment of my truck. I think today with what we're going to do, there's nothing too complicated here. That screwdriver and a pair of pliers wouldn't handle, so we're gonna give this a try. Right, back at the house, I mentioned that these locks were kind of frustrating for a couple of reasons, and this will help you perhaps pick out the right lock. You know, in this case, the previous owner apparently wanted 2 locks on here for extra security. Yeah, not a bad idea. But these locks, the key can only be removed while the bolt is in the locked position. So here's the problem with that. Okay. So I can't get the key out. Well, I've got 2 locks, so I have no way of putting this in the unlocked position while I also have this in the unlocked position and I'm able to close it. So, you know, normally you'd be like this, you can't get it closed, so you can't lock this. You know, you're in a bit of a dilemma. So you'll see down here, I bent this latch out a little bit. What this allows me to do is come down here, push this, lock it, but it's still loose, of course, because the latch is bent. So this one is still in the locked position. So I can't push the door all the way closed until I take that out of the locked position, finish putting that in closed, and now lock this. So now they are both locked. This one's actually loose because it's bent. This one's actually holding everything snugly in place, and it works pretty good. So the first step in this process is to take out both of these lock sets, and I'm going to be replacing them both, one with a thumb latch, the other one with a key latch. In order to remove these, first thing I have to do is take off the 2 latches themselves. These are put on with some nuts, and sometimes there's screws that hold these in place. So this really isn't too hard. Using our handy dandy multi-tool here. Shucks, if I can do it with a multi-tool. Can't be that hard, right? Okay, so both of the latches are off. Next thing is to remove the lock set itself, and in that case, there's this large nut here that's threaded around the entire cylinder assembly, holding it in place. These are tight, but snug, but still I can loosen these with my hand, so not too bad. That's one. And that is 2. All right, so I'm going to start off with the thumb latch and the package there. And you might need something a little different, but I'll put a link down in the description to at least show you what I started with on these, and it'll give you a place to kind of start looking. You can look at similar products. You know, make sure you get the dimensions. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the key dimension is the length of this cylinder here, so that it will fit through the door thickness and be able to bolt into place. And then the second dimension is going to be the distance back to this latch. So that can be part of this cylinder length, but of course then there's also a straight blade or an offset. And you can go 1/4 inch each way typically with the offset. And then that offset, the total dimension in the offset, will figure how deep that latch goes when it's closed, and it needs to slide in right behind the rim of the door here. In this case, I'm going to start off by taking this latch out, and this one goes on with a screw. If you look on the cylinder, there's actually flat spots on each side, and if you look at the hole in the door here, this is not actually a round hole. There are also corresponding flat areas in there. So you can only put this in 2 ways, and at least for this unit, they're really identical either way. So we put this in with the flat sides lined up, and we'll put this nut on the back here. Right next to the unit, and hold it up. Oh, it's just fine. And grab our MacGyver tool, and we'll start to cinch this up. It's a good idea to get this good and snug. So I noticed some of these cylinder units come with a backing washer here, which is probably a good idea, but these don't have that, nor did the originals apparently. So this is crushing the insulation there a little bit, but not too bad. It's good and snug, it doesn't want to rattle around in there. And then the next thing we need to do is to put on the catch here. So I'll just point this out. This catch actually looks a little small to me. It comes about halfway out into that metal area, which probably means it would be just barely catching behind the lip there. For whatever reason, the ones with the offset are longer, and the offset was what was on here originally. If I put that on, I can see with that offset, I've got about 1/4 inch in there, which is probably good for the metal as well as the gasket. The thing that does concern me is that it sticks a little bit beyond the door, and there is the trim back in here. This is about the same depth here, so it could end up hitting there. If not, it'll be perfect. So let's see what happens. The other thing I want to point out is you can put this 90 degrees apart, depending upon what you want. I like the idea of putting the latch in line with the handle. That way I can just look at this and tell if the door is in the, or rather if this thumb latch is in the locked position. Put that in place. Put it quick snug here. Close this. See how it does. Ooh, I like that. So you can see it was sticking out a little bit beyond this door edge, but there's a gap in there, so it's not hitting in the back. It's just right. So right here, when I start to feel the gasket, I can't quite latch it. Push it a little bit snugger. Boom. So that will keep that gasket nice and compressed all the way around. If it was too tight, I could come in here with a little bit and just bend this offset out just a tad. That would probably do the trick, or if I needed to tighten it, I could make a little bit of adjustment, just bending that offset in now. Now let's start in with the lock. This one will be a little more challenging. So the lock itself didn't quite match the specs that were given on Amazon, but we might be okay. It does come with a little offset. I don't think that's going to be long enough. The other thing to think about too is this is the offset from the thumb latch that I had before. So I'm actually hopeful, it's square. I'm hopeful that this will fit on here and we'll make this work. Okay, so here we have, just like up here, we've got the round cylinder with the flats. We've got the flats in the hole. The difference here, though, is that this is a key lock, and I may want to have the locked position. Again, I kind of like to have it so that the key, when it's locked, is pointing the same way as the latch, just so by eyeball I can walk up and tell if it's locked or not, and it's intuitive. This new thumb latch came with a straight section, and while it's not as long, it's pretty close. And if that was the right distance, it's pretty shallow. It's also kind of short. I really think I like this option better, even if I am reusing this old piece. Just got a little bit of corrosion on it. That's mostly cosmetic. So this screws in place. It's pretty good, really. Actually, I think this upper one was a little snug, so I might bend that tab. But so I can put them both. So, it seems pretty good. So I was told by the previous owner, when I bought it, he looked at changing out the locks on these two doors, but because they're not thick like these other two, he said that the locks wouldn't work, but it would be nice to be out of this lock and have one key for everything. Let me get a good look here. Huh. So here's the cylinder from what I bought. Looks very similar to me. It's the round hole with the flats on it. Looks to be about the same depth to me as well. I think it'll fit. I've got one of these left over. Let me check out the other door too. You know, they look the same. I've got one of these left over, or one extra. I think I'm going to try it in the power door, and if that works, I'm going to order another one for this one. They come in sets of 2, so I guess I'll have one extra, which isn't a bad thing. Unlike the others, these don't screw on the back. There's like a little tab. Try to do this with holding the camera. Okay, being able to use 2 hands, I was able to push on that tab, the one on the top, one on the bottom. This just comes right out, and you can see the tabs there. So if you were to push this into place, they would just snap and hold it, but I just push those in, it comes right out. And so the new one has the same shape. Let's see if it fits. Oh, perfect. I'm liking that. And if I look at the length, it says a little offset. It's not very long. I bet you the little offset latches that came with this will work perfect. Let's give it a shot. So this lock was oh so close. I had such high hopes that this would fit out of the box, but this was the offset that came with it. Unfortunately, it's too short. Doesn't quite latch. If it was 1/8 of an inch longer, it'd be perfect. I did have this offset. This is left over from one of the old thumb levers. Sadly, it's too long. Otherwise, it would work as well, but it hits, you know, in here when it tries to close, it hits the inside of the frame, so that won't work. These are some straight ones I gave a shot. I tried this one here. It's too short, and actually I didn't even try it. I held it up and went, no, that's not going to work. And lastly, this is a straight piece that came with the new thumb latches. It is close, but it does need to be offset. This gives enough length, I think. I can take and put a couple little bends in this, and it will be just right. So that's my plan. But to do that, I really need something a little more stout to put this into bended. This stuff is pretty hard steel. I'm sure it's probably hardened at least a little bit for a lock application. But I'll do that and put that here, and then we'll be in business. And finally, I think I'll probably be in about the same situation here with this lock, but since I don't have a lock for that right now, I'm going to order it. Well, I still have a little bit of work to do over here with the latches on the 2 little doors. That's the shower door and the power door. But I'll be able to get those taken care of. I'll order another lock, and everything else came out pretty good. I think, you know, the lessons learned from this are, number one, you can't always trust the specs in Amazon, and you know, be ready to deal with that when you get it. Luckily, they've got pretty easy returns. The other thing is, no one latch fit all. In spite of the fact that they all were very similar locks, similar doors, there were enough differences between them, whether it was the thinner metal door, the thicker cargo doors, the door on the back that pulls out was also just a tad bit different. So, you know, with these offsets and so on and so forth, be ready to maybe reuse some of your old, be ready to be a little MacGyverish and bend things up a little if you have to. If your RV's anything like mine, you're going to run into some variances there just based on the components used. But in the end, I'm going to have one lock that fits everything. It's not the standard RV lock. All right, thanks a lot. Hope you learned a little something from this, a little something from my missteps, misordering, and just know what to expect if you're going to do this. Hopefully you'll remember your tool bag, and you won't have to do it all with a multi-tool. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. All right, take care.